I think this is super, super interesting that you made that jump, right? Like from sales into podcasting. I listened to some of the other episodes. I think it's very cool. Like I was expecting it's like just one of these other like business podcasts and you just talking about sales, but yet very sort of like, yeah, just discussions with fellow humans in that sense, right?
That's
Like
it.
asking about like a lot of different topics. So yeah, how would like what have you learned like recently as part of like your podcast journey? Is there anything? Because I guess you're now in an environment where sales is always a little bit like that, right? But you just depend on yourself in that sense for to make this a success. So
Oh, in terms of what I've learned so far, or
yeah, like how's it been so far?
I don't know where to I don't know where to start and where to end, so to speak. I've learned so many different things. How should I share this with you? From a business point of view or from a people point of view?
Maybe more from a people point of view, right? Or like what I think what I'm especially interested in is like sort
Mm.
of that transition from like I would say a more typical job, right? Like the sales, you earn like good money, and now you're deciding, no, I'd rather spend my time having conversations with people, right? Like sort of like what brought about that change. I think this is what I'm also interested in. Sorry if I'm
Oh
turning
no,
this
no,
around.
it's
I
a good
guess
question because
yeah.
someone asked me the same question before, and I promised her that I was going to give her a one sentence answer. But then when I try to put pen to paper, it's been very much a culmination of many things, Nicholas. I think fundamentally, I wanted to create a platform, an avenue where people can be themselves. I think we're in a society nowadays where there's a lot of categorization. You know, you're far left, you're far right, you're from Hong Kong, you're white, you're black, you're yellow, you support that team, you support that team. So I feel that there's a lot of categorization, and I think you made a key point about there's a bit of polarization sometimes I find in society nowadays. So I said to myself, okay, you know, I've tried a dating business, I've tried SaaS, I've been in finance before. I suppose I still don't know what I'm doing. I'll be honest with you. But what's interesting and what I've learned from making that transition, it does seem like something very different. But I think deep down, if I were to connect the dots looking back, in 2010, I had a dating business called Gentleman Player.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it was a dating business that provide dating workshops for men. Terrible idea.
Yeah.
Terrible idea. Um,
Yeah.
what's interesting is that the tagline I had for the business was elevating you to the next level. So I think this podcast is very much a manifestation of how do I elevate you to the next level as an individual. And I'm doing that by allowing my guests just to share their story. Um, I think another part of it sometimes is that when you're in an organization or in society, you need to be very careful of what you say, right?
Sure. Yeah.
I wanted to strip away that.
Hmm.
So you asked me, do I have some sort of qualifying criteria that I have for guests? I just have one. You need to be yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
So this Medium podcast is very much a platform where people can share their story and be heard.
Hmm.
And I find that quite enjoyable to be talking to you, to be talking to someone in Brussels, to be talking to someone in New York. And what I realize is that fundamentally we're no different. We all really just want the same thing. So if I do leave this world, but I leave it in a better place, I reckon that's a pretty good outcome.
This idea of stewardship, right? That you leave the place a little bit better than you found it. I think it's very
Yeah, that's
really
pretty.
live it, it's very profound. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, and needless to say, this is still a concept. It's a business idea, and by all means, from a cash flow point of view, it's very important to sustain this podcast. Like, I'm happy to share this because it is what it is.
Mm.
I've got nothing to hide. It is what it is. And getting back to what your company is about, transparency. I've got nothing to hide. What you see today is me. When I'm talking to you, I want to see you, and that's pretty much it. And I think my audience is appreciating the honest conversations I have with people.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly do. I mean, that's what convinced me to sort of say yes. I feel that, yeah, these are real people, and you don't listen to that too often, right?
Yeah.
It's also, of course, you need that sort of like impetus. I think like us discussing was like what made me sort of like listen to in the first place. But then, yeah, you listen, you find yourself listening for half an hour to an hour with like a conversation with also someone you hadn't talked to, like some of these, right? Like in a longer time, and actually having like good conversations. And I feel this is, I mean, I'm not, maybe I misunderstood like the elevate yourself. I'm not sure, maybe you want to,
Oh,
because
so basically,
I feel, because like for me it was exactly not that, right? You have so many podcasts which are all about sort of like self-improvements, and you should
yeah,
always get better and become the next level of yourself. But what I actually liked about the discussions, I feel like, okay, no, these are just normal people in that sense, right? And also giving oneself the strength to sort of say, no, I could do that, right? Because I was in the, when I saw your message at first, I was thinking, do we even have like interesting things to say? Like, can we talk for like 90 minutes on something, right? Because we haven't talked for like a few years. We had chats
yeah,
before, and like listening to others, I thought, no, probably like this is super interesting, and maybe I actually have something to say, right? And this is, I like this normal aspect of
yeah. It's
things.
just
It's
normal,
exactly
right?
not improvement. Yeah.
And you're right, like we don't always have to move forward. We don't always have to improve. But getting back to you a bit about elevating you to the next level, that tagline, right? I suppose loosely, um, I'm just giving people a platform to be themselves, and if that allows them to be happier, that in a way is elevating. Like I'm elevating my guests to be themselves, because we live in a society sometimes where there's a lot of political correctness. You got to be careful what you say. I didn't want any of that when it came to this podcast. I just wanted to have genuine conversations where it's unfiltered.
Interesting. What would you do though? Let's say you find someone, and I mean, you haven't talked for a few years, right? You invite him over, and then that person starts to sort of like saying vicious things you don't agree with. Like, have you ever thought about how you would handle that sort of situation? Because if you're saying like this is not about like political correctness and everyone should sort of like just be themselves, what if it turns out that this person is sort of like has absolute like weird views, right? Like, would you like, what would you do? Have you thought about that at all yet?
That would be okay, because I'm not here to judge whether what someone says is right or wrong. I think we all grow up believing certain things. We grow up in a certain way. I might disagree with him or her, but fundamentally, I'm not the person to judge. So I'm here to just listen. I'm here to exchange ideas. If you believe in a certain thing that's somewhat controversial, I would like to understand, why do you think like this? Why do you have a structured wrong view? It's not about right or wrong, because if you are here to share something very controversial with me and you fundamentally believe in it, then so be it. I'm not here to draw a line. I'm not here to judge you. I'm just providing a platform for you to be yourself. And if it's controversial, if there is something that I find that is quite disgusting, so to speak, right? That's just my view on it. And I'm not here to judge you.
Yeah.
That's how I'll do it.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. It's one of the big questions of our times right now, right? Like how much moderation is sort of like the right amount on what level of the infrastructure, like layer should you have moderation, right? Should that be on a sort of like application side? Should it be sort of like individual shows? But it's
No.
really, I think it's a very difficult thing, right? Because and at the same time is, I mean, right now, like giving that platform, right, is, I think that's exactly it. Sort of like as you grow to a certain size, right? Like if you were like sort of like Joe Rogan level, he gets criticized for exactly that, for giving people a platform who others sort of say they shouldn't have a platform, they shouldn't have that reach, right? Yes, they have the freedom of speech, right? They can say whatever they want to say, but we shouldn't, like, society shouldn't give these people a platform. And then sort of like you have people sort of like going out and giving a platform regardless. I think some of that is like super difficult.
It's
I
very tricky.
really wouldn't want to work in a PM department of Twitter for that. I have a lot of respect for like figuring out the balancing act of moderation.
I suppose I'm in the camp of I rather teach my kids, for example, to critically analyze than to tell them what's right or wrong.
Mhm.
So it's difficult if you do have some person who appears on the platform and spreads so-called misinformation, right? I think my belief is very much on the onus, obviously excluding kids because the mind is still being formed, and that in itself is very subjective, right? I rather we move towards a world where we teach all of us how to critically analyze something and to never take something for face value.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the super critical skills you need to have nowadays, right? That you can discern what
Yeah,
is sort of like what's a trustworthy source, what is like not so trustworthy, right? Like where you should analyze more, but it also comes with a certain responsibility
it
from my
does.
perspective, right? Like if you, it's difficult, of course, sort of like I think it doesn't really apply to sort of like your podcast at this stage where you sort of like interview people who you've met before, right? But I would say like if you ever had a super controversial guest, I would see it then. I agree with you, right? Like you can have a discussion on these things, but I think it would be, the onus would be also a little bit on you to sort of like prepare for that discussion and be sort of like have questions ready to analyze, right? Like to exercise that critical thinking and sort of like also know some of the things so that you
Yeah,
can
exactly.
critically question and doubt and sort of like present sort of like your side of the view. And I think this is essentially, this is what good journalism is about, essentially,
Exactly.
right? That you have people who are also spending time and who sort of like hone that skill of probing and finding out and being relentless in that regard, right? I think this is
Yeah,
finding the balance there between having nice discussions and doing that. I think this is like
you're right.
important.
You're bang on the money. Like, I have not had a guest who's been, very controversial. But you're right. If and when I do, it's very much. It's actually quite a hard job being in this position as the host,
Hmm.
because you need to listen. You need to think a step ahead. You need to pace yourself, but you also got to make it in a way that it feels natural. And
That's from my perspective, this is like the difficult part about having actual conversations about anything, right? Like this is why I found that quite impressive that you say, hey, we can sort of like just go with the flow, because that sort of controversies, if you do a business podcast, I think you would never have, right? Like, I don't know, it's like the
yeah,
most controversial thing someone could say is like, I think the LTV to CAC ratio should only be like, I don't know, whatever, right? Like no
you're
one really
right. You're
cares about
right.
these kind of things, right? And that is usually where people get very sort of like emotional and like opinionated, is rather, it's not like the business side of things, right?
It is a tough one. The tagline for the podcast is embracing diversity of thought. Now, diversity of thought could mean super controversial, right?
Yeah.
It could be, right? I don't know yet. You raise a very good question, because you're right. There is a lot of talk right now about content moderation. How do you even approach that? And I was having a chat to my wife. Can AI even fix that? How can AI fix something which is so subjective to the individual level? So I'm very curious to see what Elon Musk is going to potentially do with Twitter. And what's interesting is that this podcast actually came from a thread on Twitter about sort of free speech.
Okay, I didn't know that. You should forward me that thread. I'll check it out.
Yeah, check it out, and it was a bit of that. I, as you can probably tell, I like to believe I am a bit of a conversationalist. I do enjoy it. I'm generally am very curious. I like asking questions because I'm just curious as to why things are like this. Why do you think in a certain way? And to me, this is no different from me talking to anyone else. But the only thing that's different, I'm just hitting the record button.
Yeah, it gives you a good reason to reach out to people and have conversations, right?
Yeah, and
Because we
I'm
would
very
not have talked otherwise.
exactly. I'm very thankful that I've established conversation from 15, 20 years ago from people I've met.
Yeah, yeah, I can. This is nice, right? Like, probably should, even without a podcast, should really do more of an effort to reach out to some of these like older connections. Say, hey, it's been some time. Like, how are you doing? And then
What's
having a
interesting?
conversation with you.
Yeah, it's interesting. But since life is so busy now, I need to go to you, Nicholas. We are speaking on Tuesday, May 10th at 4:30 p.m. my time, 2:30 p.m. Hong Kong time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need that, right? But when I'm talking with you, you're my focus. I've literally blocked out my calendar. Your name's on the whole calendar invite. I know today I'm talking to you and my attention is with you. Everything else is switched off. I use Apple for everything. I've got do not disturb. So I'm very much in the moment with you and I love it.
This is another like super important skill, right? Like being able to actually sort of like get these distractions out, right? And really trying to focus. I think it's something we're all struggling with nowadays. At least I haven't met like even sort of like people meditating every single day and resting in themselves. I think usually there's still sometimes the urge to sort of like go to your phone and check out that notification. I think this is sort of like, spending that time and quality time. And it's not just like, it's any sort of like any time you're spending with folks, right? Especially when it comes down to family and friends.
It is
sort of like,
family.
how can you carve that out?
Yeah, family, relationship. That's what life's all about. And you mentioned, how are you going to even be talking for 45 minutes, an hour? Yeah, here we are. We've been speaking for an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like that, does it?
Quite quickly. No.
That's the beauty of the conversation. And I think there's also a bit of me like, how do we bring back these conversations? You look at the war, you look at, I know I'm simplifying things, right? But wouldn't it be easier if we all just sat down and talked to one another? Yeah. So you see how there's a multitude of influences as to why I'm doing this.